So we are rewinding back to September 2022. It's the Sinkfield Cup and world champion Magnus Carlsen is playing amongst other top stars and a youngster, Hans Niemann, 19 years old, and he is rubbing people up the wrong way. So in this video, I want to take a look at a game that Hans Niemann played the day before chess changed forever. Because the very next day, he played Magnus Carlsen and the whole chess world exploded after a chess cheating scandal ensued. So in this video, we're going to look at this very interesting game played the day before, see a stunning game of chess and result in itself, and then I've also got some interview footage which I find really interesting and telling as to then why things happened the next day. You know, it's a piece of the puzzle here. So let's first look at this stunning game. Hans with white, he kicks off with c4. This is round 2. Shak now plays pawn e5, so we get an immediate imbalance. It's like a Sicilian, but with colours reversed. All 4 knights develop onto the board, and now the main move here is pawn g3. That's the classic way to play. But here we see e4. It's kind of a modern twist. Now, it looks kind of ugly because you're committing a second pawn to a light square. You're sort of killing off this bishop, whichever way it chooses to go. But we'll see some points to it. Now, bishop c5 was played. There's also a lot of theory with bishop to b4. But this one with bishop c5 allows this tactical shot. Now, we see the knight recaptured. If you take here with check, it looks like you're doing well, ruining the castling rights, then recapturing the piece. But the problem is, white gets d4, and wherever this knight jumps, say it gives a check and the king goes, well, white's got this huge centre, great compensation for ruining the castling rights, because the king's safe enough. So jumping back to the moves here, we just have the knight immediately captured by Shak. Pawn d4 is the follow-up, winning back the piece. But now you ruin the white pawn structure and the knight hops in here. So this is why it's a better way to play. Now queen d4 is the main move. Lots of theory there, or relatively lots for this line. But here we see queen f3, just a slightly different variation. And after the knight captures here, shattering the pawns, the bishop retreats. Well, now we see bishop f4, castles, and castles queenside, a very double-edged position, which Magnus Carlsen himself has had on the board before. So white's pawns are absolutely shattered, as we can see. The king's looking a bit drafty, but what does white want? Well, things like bishop d3, pawn h4, you know, storm down, attack that black king. So black's got to move quick with counterplay. Queen e7 starts it, looking to check the king. That's why we see king b2 covering that square. And now rook b8 again is just going direct after the white king. But here's an interesting moment, because h4 is one of the most direct ways for white to play, but Hans decides to hold off and go queen e3. And if you look at the clock times, he's moving very quickly, still in his prep it would seem, and Shak now burns some time with what to do. I mean, white is eyeing this pawn. In some lines it could be taken, and Shak now goes b6 to defend about that, but it's a tiny bit soft. Bishop b6 also looks a bit kind of timid, you know, you block the b pawn. b5 is actually the top move and all sorts of craziness ensues. But we're not going to go down that line, we'll stick with the game. So b6 played, but now Hans does have a free hand on the king side. But he doesn't go bishop pawn h4 to start with, he goes bishop d3 first, just developing. And now queen e6 from Shak, just nudging up the board. Sometimes there's ideas of bishop g5, which can be annoying. Plus from here the queen looks across the 6th rank, potentially in future. And now I'm highlighting this move because again it's most direct, but Hans goes for this, which the computer doesn't love as much. And now rook e8 from Shak. Again, the computer doesn't love. It preferred bishop a6 there, but we'll carry on. Here we see the rook now centralise, and it's at this moment that Shak launches his bowling ball down the alley as Yasser Serwan describes it. But just before we see that one, a shout out to the sponsors of today's video, Brilliant.org, the #1 place to learn math and computer science. So this is Brilliant.org, and as you can see, it's so visual and just so much fun. It's kind of become a daily addiction now. I mean, I never realised how much fun you can have just literally doing math, science, logic puzzles. I haven't done this kind of stuff since I was a kid and in school, but the way they present it, the levels you can do from beginner to intermediate to advanced, just means there's something for everyone, and you find yourself keep coming back to it, and it especially helps with the concentration levels. I mean, they've even got a section of it which has some chess puzzles, which is awesome. Obviously, I've been working through them, and I'm seeing the difference there in my own concentration, whether it's on a chess video, playing chess, doing something else that takes concentration. You know, Brilliant.org really helps you just think in that different way. So I highly recommend trying out this awesome tool, and the first 30 days are completely free, so give it a go. There's nothing to lose, and if you do decide to sign up for a premium plan, well, then you can use the link brilliant.org/epicchess, and the first 200 people to use it will get 20% off an annual premium plan. So give it a go, nothing to lose. So Shak now plays pawn to b5, looking to rip open lines. Hans keeps them shut with pawn c5. I mean, the computer gives a question mark there, but ignore it. You know, it wants to take here actually, but this is human chess. You keep lines closed. Now we see b4, and this is the idea of the bowling ball analogy, that the ball is coming down the alley being the b file here. These are the pins, but it doesn't hit any pins. You know, here Shak's thrown a gutter ball, because here the pawn advances, it carries on again, and in some lines earlier on, before the bishop was hitting the rook, you know, the commentators were looking at the pawn just kicking on to a3, and then using this one as a shield. Still, it doesn't connect with any pins. But here Hans, he decides to capture. Now he's giving an exchange which Shak takes, the rook recaptures, but in compensation, here Hans has the bishop pair and an attack coming on the black king potentially, plus his king is now looking quite a bit safer. Now, the best move here for Shak was pawn d5. Looks so counterintuitive, and how often do you see the possibility of a double en passant for white, which could be played here? But the idea is there's a pin here, you know, you can capture the rook if you take with this one. And if you go here, then there's here in response, still this pawn is pinned. So this was best for black, really nice idea. But Shak misses it, goes pawn a5. Logical, looking to rip this one open, right? But now Hans gets to counter with good counterplay. Now he starts with bishop d2. The computer preferred queen h4 first, but okay, not such a bad move. Bishop a6 now played, pressuring this pawn here. It's pinned by this one's pinned, of course, to the king, so you do have to deal with this threat. Now queen h4 covers the pawn, also threatens this check down here, and so g6 blocks that, and the queen centralizes. Look at Hans' position, beautiful here. And now Shak, he actually just chucks this pawn. I mean, a4 looks so logical, but then b4 comes, the king's going to sit on a3, and white's got that free hand on the king side. So instead, rook b7, now the pawn drops and Shak doubles. Now after pawn b4 comes, what's the idea? Well, it's this, to sack the exchange. I mean, Shak hates defending, being on the back foot. He's the one that wants to attack historically. You know, he doesn't like having material. He wants initiative and attack. So the king goes, and now he just drops back this rook. And he's hoping he can now drum up checks, drum up play with the exposed king. But bishop e4 is just a great move, because it stops the queen from transferring across the c6 and into the battlefield. The pawn covers this square, the bishop covers this square. So now we see queen e8, looking to maybe activate in a different direction, who knows. But bishop d5 comes, and here Shak, he feels he has to challenge that piece with bishop to b7. But more precision from Hans. He slides the rook. Now there's a nice pressure down the b file there. And after the bishop drops back, not best by the way, the computer actually wanted to take here, but it's so ugly to human eyes because you connect all the pawns and this just looks so passive for black. But it's the top way to play, to try and hold a draw, give checks, maybe one day get a perpetual. But here the bishop drops back, the rook is chopped, queen recaptures, and after captures in the corner, this pawn drops, and this should be a lost endgame. But Shak now looks for perpetuals. So he could take here, but instead he goes for this one and picks up the e-pawn, also covers here. Not a bad way to play, but it's just so tough now as Hans marches in the king, and the double pawns actually help give some nice cover from checks. Shak gets his pawn running. We see king c6. This one drops. Now check. The king goes and the queen comes to this solid square, pressuring this pawn, boxing the king, covering the f pawn, just so powerful. This pawn drops and the king captures here. Simple plan for Hans, he wants to march this one through. And this is basically now the course of the game, and there's so little that Shak can do to prevent. These were the final moves as the pawn marches down, and just as we now get towards the end of this race, we soon see resignation here. Why does it come? Well, one sample line is moving the king back like this, and yes, you can keep checking, but eventually the king dodges away and the pawn is just going through. In this position, the checks have run out. You can't go queen a5 to pin, that pawn's going through, and there are a number of variations just like that. Now, this is the interview which came after the game from Hans Niemann.
Hans, this is your first win against the 2750 plus. What does that do for your mood?
It's okay, but it's not a surprise to me that I'm beating these players. So perhaps, you know, when I've improved quite a lot lately, so I've sort of become numb to these rapid changes. For me, in my mind, I'm already, you know, a top player. So winning a game confirms that. But my confidence, of course, can be strengthened by such a win. But confidence comes from commitment and hard work, so not just winning.
So Niemann's arrogance on full display, and I think this is just another reason that Magnus was so infuriated by his loss to Hans Niemann the next day. It all then kicked off, and if you want more details, check out this video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.